Big Shaq walks into a dusty restaurant. Expecting silence, what he finds is a girl singing like fire lit her lungs. Not for applause, not for dreams, but to buy time for a grandfather running out of it. That voice, it doesn't just move the room, it forces Big Shaq to confront the cost of survival, and what happens when talent refuses to beg. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The video was blurry, filmed vertically, the way most things viral are, fast, unpolished, and real. It opened on the corner of a faded diner, where sunlight pushed through cracked blinds, casting dusty rays across chipped linoleum and plastic table numbers. A girl stood at the front, beside a flickering jukebox and a hand-scrawled menu board, offering fried catfish and sweet tea for $5. She wasn't dressed for attention. Hoodie 2 sizes too big, jeans shredded from wear, not fashion, torn sneakers, no mic, no music track, just her. Then her voice, raw, trembling, but not weak, rose into the room like it had something to prove. There was no introduction, no theatrics, just her soul, opening wide in a place where souls were usually guarded. Her eyes didn't look at the camera. They looked somewhere far away, like she was trying to reach someone who wasn't in the room. The song wasn't famous, and that made it worse. It was personal, original, about losing sleep when you can't lose hope, about needing $47,000 when you barely make $47 in tips, about how you keep smiling when you've got nothing left to smile for. The video ended on silence, not applause, just the quiet sound of forks lowering, plates untouched. You could almost hear the world trying to remember how to breathe. An hour later, it had 1,000 views, then 10,000. By morning, it was at 2 million. The caption said only one thing: she's singing to pay for her granddad's surgery. And the internet reacted like it always does, with tears, retweets, and offers of support. Strangers commented things like, "This broke me," and "Let's find her a record deal." Influencers stitched the clip over their own soft cries, promising to spread awareness. Someone dropped a GoFundMe link. Others debated whether it was real. But somewhere outside that noise, sitting in a quiet high-rise apartment, Shaquille O'Neal was watching the video with the volume turned all the way up. He wasn't watching the voice. He was watching the weight behind it. The kind that doesn't come from poverty alone, but from something deeper, that blend of defiance and defeat. He recognized it instantly. Not from the court, not from fame. From his mother's face when she was working 2 jobs and hiding tears in the pantry. From the kids he'd met through his foundation. The ones who smiled in public and cried in stairwells. He knew that look. Shaq muted the video, sat in stillness, and hit replay. Again, and again. On the 4th run, he leaned forward, staring at the girl's hands, clenched just slightly at her sides. He zoomed in on the background. Diner logo on the window. A street name half visible in the reflection of a car windshield. He recognized it. Edgewater Drive. Atlanta. He didn't call his team. He didn't post about it. He didn't share the clip or ask for opinions. He simply put on a hoodie, pulled his cap low and drove. Atlanta was loud in the spring, sun cracking through concrete, birds shouting over car horns. The city had changed. Gentrified in pockets, decayed in others, but some corners still had that old heartbeat. Shaq knew Edgewater. Hadn't driven through in years. The diner sat on a tilted block between a pawn shop and a liquor store, like time had forgotten to gentrify this stretch. He parked 2 blocks away, walked slow. Didn't want attention. Not yet. The door creaked open like a movie cue, and he stepped inside, ducking slightly through the frame. The smell hit first: grease, syrup, and old heat. Comforting. The kind of place you don't rush through. No one looked up. The breakfast crowd was thin. A man in overalls flipped through a newspaper. A mother split scrambled eggs between 2 toddlers. And there she was, wiping down tables in the corner. Same hoodie, hair pulled back with a pencil, earbuds in, head nodding faintly. She wasn't singing. Not yet. Shaq took a seat near the window, facing away. A waitress came by. Called him big fella. Took his order like he was just another customer. He kept his head down, listened, waited. 15 minutes later, someone called out, "Lennox, your turn." She looked up like she'd forgotten she was supposed to exist. Pulled out one earbud, walked to the corner, and without a word, started singing again. It was a different song. Slower, lower. This one was about water, about how you can't stop drowning when you're the one holding yourself under. The room didn't breathe. She finished, nodded once, and sat at the counter. No one clapped. That wasn't the vibe. It was church without pews. Shaq didn't move. He didn't approach. Just watched. Then he dropped 2 folded 20s on the table, walked past her on the way out, and said, "You got a gift most people wouldn't know what to do with." She blinked, looked up. He was already halfway to the door. Outside, he exhaled hard. That girl, Lennox, was more than viral. She was dangerous in the way real stories are, the kind that remind people of their own pain. He could already feel the vultures circling. Brands, sponsors, news crews. They'd package her suffering, market her grief. But not if he got there first, not if he reached her before they turned her into a hashtag. Shaq looked back at the diner one last time. Then he got in the car, started the engine, and drove, not away but into whatever came next. He didn't have a plan, only an instinct. And sometimes, that's all it takes to change a life. The walls of the diner were yellow once. Now they were the color of stories. Smoke-stained, weather-worn, edges curled like the memories of people who'd come and gone before anyone bothered to learn their names. The flickering overhead light in the far corner pulsed like it was on its last heartbeat, and yet no one rushed to fix it. It was the kind of place that survived not because it was beautiful, but because it was needed, not polished but familiar. The kind of place people returned to when nowhere else would take them. Shaq sat in the back booth, hood pulled low, face partially hidden behind a battered menu that hadn't changed in years. Monday special, biscuits and gravy, $3.99. Add grits for $1. The same laminated sheet he'd seen as a rookie. The same booth where he'd once sat with his mom, knees too long for the table even then, listening to her count tips and ration gas money like it was science. That booth had held boys who grew into men, men who forgot how to be boys. But today, it was holding him, Shaquille O'Neal, former MVP, media mogul, quiet giant. And today, he wasn't here for the food. She stepped onto the tiny stage without ceremony. No one called her name. There were no speakers, no spotlight, no crowd, just the clatter of forks and the hush that fell without warning. Lennox didn't announce herself. She didn't need to. She simply stood there, shoulders drawn, hands tucked into her sleeves, gaze steady but far away, and then her voice broke through the chatter like a storm rolling in from nowhere. She wasn't trying to sound pretty. She wasn't reaching for notes the way singers do, when they want applause. Lennox sang like the words were too heavy to hold any longer, like she had nowhere else to put the ache. Her voice was velvet and gravel, desperation and dare. It was a letter to someone who might never read it. She sang of hunger that doesn't just sit in your belly, but in your bones, of waiting for something better that never comes, of being invisible in a room full of people, the kind of loneliness that shows up wearing your skin. And Shaq, a man who'd stood before millions, felt the weight of every syllable as if it was aimed at him. Because this wasn't performance. This was confession. This was survival, turned into sound. When she stopped, no one moved. There was no clapping, just the sound of the old jukebox humming in the background. Embarrassed to exist in the same room as that kind of truth. Lennox gave a brief nod, turned, and walked off stage without looking up. Shaq didn't approach, not yet. He stood, slid 2 20s under his untouched plate, and walked out the door as quietly as he'd come. The morning sun had already started to fade behind a veil of dull gray clouds. His car was parked a block down, half hidden beneath the shade of a rusted billboard for a long-closed pawnshop. He hadn't made it halfway when he heard the quick, defiant footsteps behind him. "You think you slick?" Her voice cracked like thunder after drought. He turned, slowly. Lennox was standing there, arms folded, jaw tight, eyes like burning coal. "You just drop money on the table and walk away?" she snapped. "Let me guess, you saw the video, figured you'd show up, get your little good deed in before lunch, and ride off into whatever feel-good story you're building." Shaq studied her face. Her anger wasn't theatrical. It was practiced, defensive, the kind you use when you've been offered help with too many strings attached, the kind you wear when every gesture comes with a catch. He didn't argue. He just nodded, solemnly. "You're right." She flinched, didn't expect agreement. "But I heard you," he continued. "I heard you, Lennox. And that counts for something. Even if it's nothing to you." "You don't know me," she spat. "I don't," he said, voice calm. "But I've known pain, And I've known talent. And I've known people who had both, and didn't survive either. The wind blew her curls across her eyes, and for a second she looked like the girl in the video again. Not fierce, not fearless, but just tired. Tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. She shook her head, turned to leave, and muttered, "You're just like the rest of them." But he didn't follow. Didn't beg. Just let her walk away. That night, the diner emptied early. The rain came in sudden, loud sheets, drumming on the roof like fists. Ruth, the owner, wiped down tables and hummed quietly to herself, glancing out the window every now and then. Lennox stayed behind, counting out her tips in the corner booth, earbuds in, her head nodding to something only she could hear. She didn't notice the envelope. Ruth slid across the table until she felt its weight against her wrist. "What's this?" she asked, removing one earbud. "Guy left it earlier. Said it was for you," Ruth said without looking up. Lennox opened the envelope slowly, like it might explode. Inside was a folded napkin, with a note scribbled in tight, even writing. "You don't owe me. Just keep singing like that." She stared at it for a long time, then folded it back up, placed it in her backpack, and zipped it shut like it held something sacred. But she didn't smile. Not yet. The next morning, Shaq returned. Same booth. Same waitress. Same quiet. Lennox walked past him, nodded slightly. Not as thanks but as acknowledgement. She didn't ask why he was there, and he didn't volunteer. They sat in separate booths, parallel lives overlapping for the briefest time. When she sang again, it was a different kind of song. Not softer, not sweeter, just aware. Like she knew someone was listening, who wouldn't ask her to change. Like she finally had permission to be herself, without performance, without pretense. Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds broke just enough for a crack of light to hit the window, and land right on her face. As she hit the final note, it didn't change anything. Bills still loomed. Her grandfather was still sick. The world was still broken. But for a moment, the song made it bearable. Shaq finished his coffee, stood slowly, and left once more without a word. And this time, Lennox watched him go. Not with suspicion, but with something far more dangerous. Hope. Shaq started showing up like clockwork. Mornings mostly, always before the lunch crowd crept in. He'd take his usual booth in the back corner seat, window to his left, and order the same thing: grits, turkey sausage, black coffee, no sugar. Sometimes he'd bring a paperback, sometimes a notepad, but most days he just watched the room quietly, watched it live. The regulars had stopped whispering by the third visit. Everyone knew who he was, but he carried himself like a man asking not to be seen, and the diner, this place that had raised its own rules over time, respected that kind of silence. Lennox still sang, less often now, but when she did, there was a tension in her voice, like the notes were fighting to stay controlled. She'd look anywhere but his booth. Some days she'd brush past his table without a word. Others she'd give him a quick nod. They didn't talk much, not at first. It was a slow thaw, an understanding built in the spaces between noise. Shaq never asked her questions, never pried, and because of that, Lennox started offering answers on her own. It started with small things: what school she dropped out of, where she used to hang out after curfew, how she figured out how to stretch one box of oatmeal over 6 breakfasts. She spoke like someone who didn't expect anyone to care, and she used jokes like smoke screens, throwing out sarcasm like flares to misdirect the truth. But Shaq listened, always, not the way people usually did, waiting for a turn to speak. He listened like it was his job, like every word was a piece of something he was building in his head. He never filled the silence with pity, never once said "I'm sorry," and maybe that's why she kept talking. Eventually the truth came out like it always does, through exhaustion. She hadn't meant to spill it that afternoon, but she was tired, and tired people tell the truth without asking their pride for permission. "I owe the hospital 47 grand, she said suddenly, stirring her third cup of coffee, eyes on the spoon. "And if I don't have it by the 28th, they'll pull my granddad's slot off the surgery board." Shaq didn't flinch, didn't blink. He just sat up straighter, like the weight of the words deserved a more respectful posture. "How long have you known?" "Since the day they diagnosed him. They said we had 90 days to pay. Now we're down to 12. "You got anything saved?" She laughed, and it wasn't the kind that made people smile. It was hollow and mean, and small. "I got $212, a collection of unpaid bus tickets, and a busted phone with 3 cracked screens stacked on top of each other like an iPhone lasagna. Shaq didn't smile, but something in his face shifted. Something deep. Let me help. It was simple, calm, no strings, no pitch. But Lennox flinched like he'd slapped her.
No, just no.
She shook her head, fingers tightening around her spoon. I don't need a savior. I'm not trying to be one. Well, you're failing at that, she snapped, then pushed her cup away. Because every time you show up, sit here and pretend this isn't easy for you, you are trying to save me, and I'm not interested in being someone's project. Shaq stayed quiet for a beat. The buzz of the ceiling fan grew louder in the silence. You think money makes it easy? She shot him a look. Doesn't it? Shaq leaned forward, arms on the table, his voice low. Money makes it different. Doesn't make it easy. It just gives you fewer excuses when you mess up. Lennox scoffed. You think I care about excuses? You think it matters how you messed up? People still line up to love you. That's not love, he said. That's memory. People remember what they want. She didn't respond, just stared at the chipped ceramic mug between them. A few minutes passed before she spoke again, softer now. They look at me like I'm a sad headline, like I'm the human version of a bad commercial. Brown girl, sick granddad, dusty town, one perfect voice. I've been someone's poster since I was 13. Shaq's eyes didn't move. They love you, she continued, but they pity me. That's the difference. He nodded once. Slow, deliberate. You ever been the only black girl in a classroom where the teacher only calls on you to explain slavery? She asked suddenly. Or the only one not invited to someone's birthday, but then they ask you to sing at their sweet 16 because you sound so soulful. That's what my life's been. A stage they don't want to share. Shaq didn't offer comfort. Didn't try to rewrite her pain. I'm tired of being seen only when I'm hurting, she whispered. I'm tired of people pretending I'm powerful when I'm really just in pain. I hear you. She laughed again. Quieter. Yeah. You keep saying that. Because it matters. She didn't say thank you. She didn't apologize. But she didn't storm off either. The next day he showed up again. She didn't speak to him, but she brought him coffee without asking. No sugar, just the way he liked it. A small gesture. A bridge. The conversation shifted over the next few days. Lighter, then heavier, then light again. A rhythm formed. Lennox started singing more freely, not just the sad songs. She tried a jazzy tune once, and forgot the words halfway through, laughing into the mic. Shaq laughed too, loud enough to make the other tables look up. But the money still hung between them like a thick curtain. He brought it up twice more. Both times, she shut it down. Not angrily now, just exhausted. It's not about you, she said. It's about what comes after. I let one rich man help, and the next 5 think they're entitled to write my ending. I've seen it. I've lived it. Shaq didn't argue. Just said, all right. But that night, he drove past the hospital. Looked at the neon sign buzzing against the dark. He parked in the lot, and sat there with the engine off, staring at the entrance like it might open, and offer some kind of clarity. Inside his glove compartment was an envelope, already filled out, already signed, a donation form. Anonymous. Clean. He'd been carrying it for 4 days. He left it there. Not yet. Not until she was ready. Back at the diner, Lennox sang again. This time her voice was less sharp, less armored. There was still pain, but now it was laced with something new. Something closer to surrender, but not weakness. Shaq listened from his booth, hands folded on the table, watching the girl who didn't want saving but couldn't stop saving herself. He thought about his own life, how he used his size to shield his heart, how people assumed he never felt small just because his body wasn't. But he'd felt small plenty. In locker rooms, in green rooms, in rooms where no one spoke his language of loss. And maybe that's why he kept coming back. Not to help, not to fix, but to witness. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for someone is to sit beside them in the dark without asking them to turn on the light. As the song ended, the room hushed again. And for a moment the diner felt holy. $5,000 wouldn't cover the surgery. Not even close. But it would buy her time. A few weeks more. Another phone call without cancellation. Maybe even help her grandfather get better post-op care, if the surgery ever happened. And what was a little crying on camera? She did it in real life all the time. Might as well make something off it. She almost said yes. She drafted a reply. Even typed it out fully. I'm in. What's the next step before deleting it again? Her thumb hovered over the screen. Her stomach turned. She wasn't even sure why. That night, she didn't sing. She washed dishes in the back while Ruth hummed gospel in the kitchen. And she tried to drown out the noise in her own head. The lie. The almost deal. The way Shaq had stopped looking at her like she was made of steel and started seeing her like something fragile again. She hated that look. It made her feel cracked. The next morning started normal. Dead phone. Late bus. One step behind her whole shift. The kind of day where even the coffee pot felt like it was judging her. She went to grab her apron from the locker in the back hallway. Small metal squares painted over with years of names. Some carved in, some long gone. Her locker was the fourth from the bottom, duct taped at the hinge. But when she opened it, something was resting on top of her apron. A card. No envelope. Just a folded square of thick paper. Blank outside. Inside, 5 words written in strong familiar print. You don't have to sell your tears. Underneath it, in smaller print, you already earned what you're worth.
Theo.
She stared at the card, her throat tightening. Tucked beneath it was a single white paper, neatly folded, stamped in blue. A payment confirmation from the hospital. Not in her name. Not in Shaq's either. Anonymous donor. No note. No contact info. Just a number. $47,000. Paid in full. Lennox blinked fast. Once. Twice. Then again, she sat down on the floor of the locker room. The card still in her hand. The paper crinkling in her lap. She didn't cry. Not right away. It wasn't that kind of moment. It wasn't relief. It was confusion. It was something deeper than gratitude. Heavier than shock. It was being seen. Entirely. Without being asked to perform. The day moved around her in a blur. Customers came and went. Orders rang out from the kitchen. Ruth kept handing out refills and winking at the same old men she'd known since forever. But Lennox moved differently. Slower, calmer. Something in her chest had shifted. Shaq came in just before noon. Same booth. Same order. No eye contact. Not until she walked over and slid into the seat across from him without asking. He looked up, surprised but not startled. You didn't have to do that, she said, voice low. Didn't do anything, he replied, sipping his coffee. She tilted her head. You left a card. People leave cards all the time. Not with my name on it. He didn't deny it. He didn't confirm it either. Just watched her like he was waiting to see what came next. I lied, she admitted. About the sponsor, about the money, I just didn't know how to need someone like you. Shaq set his mug down. You don't need me. She leaned back. Then why help? Because you're already doing the hard part. I just paid the toll. They sat in silence for a moment. Then she said, I almost sold my story to some influencer. Almost sang into a ring light for a woman named Tash with eyelash extensions longer than her sentences. Shaq snorted. That bad? She wanted me to cry on cue. He looked at her, serious again. Don't ever cry for them. I didn't. Because of the card. Because of you. She didn't say thank you. He didn't ask her to. Instead she stood, patted the table twice, and walked back toward the kitchen. Shaq watched her go, the shadow of a smile forming. The lie had broken something. But maybe, just maybe, the truth was starting to build something better. Shaq was already there. Corner booth. Coffee half full. Hoodie up like he was just another big man trying not to be seen. But he saw her. The moment she walked in, he looked up and knew. And she didn't wait. She marched straight to his table. Dropped the hospital receipt in front of him, and stared. He didn't reach for it. Didn't blink. Just sipped his coffee slow. Like he was letting the moment stretch. You said it wasn't you, she said. Voice low but pointed. It wasn't. Don't lie to me again. Shaq sighed. I didn't put my name on it. Lennox. Maybe someone else saw the video. Felt something. Don't insult me. Her voice sharpened. You sat there, watched me spill everything. I let you in and now you get to be the silent hero, huh? Hide behind some anonymous donation while I find out like I'm a headline? I didn't ask to be a hero, he said, finally looking her dead in the eyes. You needed help. I needed dignity. There it was. The word that cut through the diner air like a blade. Shaq leaned back, quiet. His size suddenly felt irrelevant. The booth shrunk around the two of them, the clink of forks and glasses in the background fading beneath the tension. Lennox shook her head, almost laughing, but there was nothing funny in her expression. You don't get to do that. You don't get to swoop in, make decisions for me, and then hide behind silence. I didn't want credit. No, you wanted control. She snapped. Same thing, different wrapping. He opened his mouth, but she was already gone. Storming through the kitchen, apron barely tied, out the back exit. She didn't come back for the rest of the shift. That night, she sang. Not at the diner, not for tips, not for hope. She showed up at an open mic in a dim-lit dive across town. Her name scribbled on the board in red marker. The mic crackled. The lights were too bright. But she didn't care. She walked up and stood with her back straight, and her heart blistering. She didn't even introduce herself. The song that came out wasn't the one she planned. It wasn't polished. It wasn't marketable. It was pure fury, dressed in melody. She sang about betrayal that felt like kindness, about voices that are stolen in the name of help, about being touched without permission, even if the touch came through a gesture. Her voice hit hard, no crescendos, no pretty harmonies, just raw edges and gutted vowels, like she was pulling the notes from the space between memory and regret. And somewhere, near the far end of the room, under the flicker of a faulty neon beer sign, a man in a gray coat recorded every second, not on his phone, on a small silver camcorder. No light, no sound, just shadows and intent. He didn't react to the song, didn't flinch or nod. When she finished and the silence fell like a wave, he stood, slipped out the side door, and walked to a waiting black sedan parked 2 blocks down. Inside, he made a call. She's not taking the bait yet, he said. His voice was calm, businesslike. But we'll break her. They always break. He hung up before hearing the response. Back in the club, Lennox was shaking. Not visibly, not in a way anyone could see. But inside, every part of her felt like glass on the verge. She walked outside into the cold air, breath puffing out in tight bursts, adrenaline making her fingertips tingle. She wanted to scream. Instead, she went home. Her grandfather was asleep in the next room, soft breathing audible through the cracked door. The sound grounded her, reminded her why she hadn't walked away from it all. She sat at the kitchen table, pulled the receipt back out of her backpack, and stared at it. The blue hospital header, the zero balance, the anonymous line. She hated how much she needed it, and hated that even now, she didn't really believe anyone else could have done it but him. The next morning, she didn't show up at the diner. Ruth called twice. Lennox didn't answer. She turned off her phone and wandered the city instead, walking aimlessly through streets she thought she knew. People recognized her. A few. One girl whispered, "That's her, the singer from that video." Another tried to ask for a picture, but Lennox just kept walking. By early afternoon, she found herself in the quiet wing of the local library, an odd place to land, but safe. She sank into a corner chair, headphones in, but no music playing. She thought about Shaq, how he never bragged, never posted, never asked her to change. She thought about the way he looked when she dropped the receipt, more hurt than guilty, like someone who didn't know how to explain doing the right thing the wrong way. Still, it didn't erase what it felt like, powerless, invisible in a different kind of way. It wasn't about the money. It was about the choice being taken from her. And she'd spent her entire life fighting for choices. Late in the day, she returned to the diner, quietly. She didn't speak to anyone, just tied on her apron and got to work. Ruth didn't say a word, just gave her that knowing look. A little sideways, a little soft. Shaq wasn't there. He didn't come in that night, or the next. And though Lennox would never admit it out loud, she missed the silence of him sitting nearby. By the third day, she'd convinced herself that was it. He'd helped. She'd rejected it. He was done. And she would have accepted that, maybe even welcomed it, if it hadn't been for the envelope waiting in her locker on Thursday afternoon. It was small, handwritten, no stamp, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Not a letter, a contract. Music rights, video licensing, personal brand agreement. Her name, her story, the viral clip, all in print, already drafted, already ready. And at the bottom, the logo of a firm she didn't recognize but had seen in a million sponsored stories. Attached was a sticky note. "You have 72 hours. They're already calling you the next big voice." There was no signature, no mention of who sent it, but Lennox knew. Someone had been watching, listening, waiting for her to break, and she wasn't sure how much longer she could keep holding. Just then, the front door chimed. Shaq stepped in, like fate had kept him waiting, until the most inconvenient moment. He scanned the room, paused, then walked toward them with slow, grounded steps. The man with Griffin stood, defensive by reflex. But Shaq didn't flinch, just looked at Lennox. "You good?" Lennox opened her mouth, but Griffin cut in. "Shaquille O'Neal, man of the hour. I was wondering when you'd show up." Shaq's gaze didn't waver. "And you are?" "Griffin Lane. Talent acquisition, music and influence management. We're exploring a partnership with Lennox here." Shaq looked at the envelope on the table, then at Lennox. "Can we talk?" She didn't move. "I'm not hiding anything," Griffin said, too quick. "We're offering her a real chance. A structured chance." Shaq looked at him once. Flat. "You talk like she's a product." "She's a brand, Mr. O'Neal." "No," Shaq said, voice still calm but laced with iron. "She's a person, and her voice isn't yours to flip." Lennox stood too suddenly. "Stop." Both men looked at her. She grabbed the envelope, pressing it against her chest like armor. "You don't get to fight over me," she said, eyes darting between them. "Griffin's not my owner, but you're not my keeper either, Shaq." "I'm not trying to own you," Shaq replied quietly. "But you keep acting like I don't know what I'm doing." "I know you know. That's why I'm saying don't sign that. You sign it, they'll own your story. All of it. You'll wake up in 2 years and realize your pain's making money for someone who's never had a scar." Griffin chuckled, standing now, brushing off invisible lint. This righteous act might play well in courtrooms or on daytime TV. But Lennox? She's smart. She sees the opportunity. "I see the contract," she said, cutting in. "And I haven't signed a damn thing yet." Shaq's voice softened. "You don't need this." "I do." Her voice cracked on the word. "I need something. Something that makes all of this mean something." She stepped back from both of them. "You were right, Shaq," she said. "I've got a voice that hurts when it comes out. And I want that to count for more than a few likes and some charity money." He looked at her, heart behind his eyes. "It already does. But not in the way that feeds me." The words hit. Honest. Sharp. Not cruel, but real. Shaq didn't argue. He nodded. Once. And then he walked out. Quiet. No speeches. No grand gestures. Just left. Griffin waited a beat. Then turned to her, slipping a business card onto the table. "He means well. But meaning well doesn't change systems. We do." She didn't pick up the card. "Take your time," he added. "Just not too much. Offers like this don't sit forever." He left with his people, their cologne and corporate breath trailing behind them. Lennox sat down slowly, the booth feeling colder now. She stared at the contract again, but the words blurred. For the first time, she didn't feel angry. She felt hollow, as if no matter which road she picked, some part of her would have to be sold off just to keep walking. That night she didn't sing. She sat in bed, phone in hand, watching the original viral video again. Her voice. That moment. Raw. Unfiltered. A girl on the edge, not trying to make a career, just trying to make it through. And now it was a currency. She texted Shaq. One line. "Are you done?" No reply. At least, not right away. And so she waited. Suspended in a choice that looked like a lifeline but felt more like a leash. It was a Wednesday morning. Humid but quiet, with the kind of stillness that settles just before something shifts. The diner felt heavier than usual. Muted conversations, fewer smiles, and a lingering tension from whatever ghost hadn't left the room. Ruth was behind the counter, humming gospel through tight lips, and Lennox was wiping down booths with more force than necessary. She hadn't sung in 3 days, not at the diner, not anywhere. Her voice wasn't broken, but her will to use it was framed. The bell over the door jingled, soft and slow. And in walked a woman who didn't belong to the moment, but didn't interrupt it either. Lucille O'Neal, tall and composed, with presence that didn't ask permission. She didn't scan the room like a stranger. She walked like someone who already knew the layout, someone who had sat with stories thicker than syrup, and didn't flinch from any of them. She wore simple pearl earrings and a gray cardigan, the kind of quiet confidence that didn't need flash to be remembered. She walked straight to the booth in the corner, the one Shaq had claimed as his, and slid into the seat like it had been waiting for her. Lennox noticed. She noticed everything these days. Lucille didn't call her over. She just sat, opened her purse, pulled out a hand cream she didn't use, and waited. Eventually Lennox approached, hesitant, arms crossed like she wasn't sure if she was supposed to sit or serve. "You gonna sit down?" Lucille said gently. or stand there looking like your thoughts are trying to outrun you. Lennox blinked, then slid into the opposite side of the booth. I don't take meetings with strangers, she said cautiously. Good, Lucille nodded. Because I'm not one. Lennox tilted her head, confused. I'm Shaquille's mother. The name landed heavier than expected. Shaq never talked about his family. Not directly. He mentioned his mom once. Said she was the kind of woman who could hold a room without raising her voice. Lennox remembered that line now. Because here she was, doing exactly that. I ain't come here to fix you, Lucille added. I don't believe in fixing people who already know how to fight. So why are you here? Lennox asked, the edge still in her tone. Lucille leaned forward, folding her hands. Because you remind me of my son before the world let him be kind. Back when he thought anger was armor, and silence meant strength. Lennox didn't reply, but something in her shoulders relaxed. Lucille didn't push. She sat there, letting the moment stretch, giving space like she knew it would fill itself. And eventually, it did. I think my voice is cursed, Lennox said, almost whispering. Lucille said nothing, just tilted her head, inviting more. Every time I sing, Lennox continued, eyes fixed on the table, someone disappears. The words didn't feel dramatic when she said them. They felt like facts, a quiet, lived truth. My mom left the year I made the honor choir. Said she needed to chase her own life. Never came back. My cousin? Shot 2 weeks after I sang at a school assembly. My music teacher, Mr. Harrell, collapsed in his car the night after my solo competition. Heart attack. And now Shaq's gone too. Lucille watched her closely. You think you're the reason they leave? Lennox's eyes welled, but she blinked fast, holding it back. Every time I let my voice out, something breaks. Lucille didn't speak for a while. The hum of the diner filled the silence, the clatter of forks, Ruth tapping her nails on the register, the low whir of the ancient ceiling fan. Then Lucille reached into her bag, pulled out a folded napkin, and slid it across the table. Lennox opened it slowly. One sentence written in looping, steady cursive. Sometimes we sing not to be heard, but to survive. Lennox stared at the napkin. It wasn't advice. It wasn't comfort. It was truth. You've got this idea, Lucille said softly, that your voice is too big for the world. That when you let it out, people run, or fall, or fade. But maybe your voice doesn't break people. Maybe it shows them what they were already trying to hide. Lennox looked up. Then why do I feel like I'm always alone afterward? Because some folks aren't strong enough to stay after truth. Doesn't make the truth wrong. Doesn't make you dangerous. I don't want to lose anyone else, Lennox said, her voice shaking for the first time. You didn't lose my son, Lucille replied. You just scared him. Lennox furrowed her brow. I didn't mean to. You didn't. That's what scared him. Lucille leaned back, eyes kind but clear. He's a good man. But sometimes good men don't know how to hold complicated women without feeling like they have to fix them. And when you don't let them fix you, they feel useless. So they disappear. The words settled in Lennox's chest like heavy rain on dry earth. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Lucille continued, voice quiet now. You're not cursed, baby. You're powerful. You just haven't learned how to trust your own power yet. That's the part that hurt. Lennox folded the napkin carefully, like it might crumble, and tucked it into her apron. Lucille stood, smoothing out her cardigan. She placed $2 on the table, untouched coffee beside it. Don't let the world shrink you, she said as she walked away. And don't let silence be your apology. She left the diner without another word. No hugs. No fanfare. Just truth. Lennox watched her go, then sat in the booth for a long time. And when she finally stood, something in her posture had changed. Not stronger, just more steady. She didn't sing that day, but when she hummed while wiping tables, it didn't sound like mourning. It sounded like surviving. The pen didn't feel heavy when she signed it. That was the first betrayal. Lennox had expected more resistance, her hand trembling, her stomach twisting. Some dramatic moment where her instinct screamed, "Don't do this." But it didn't happen. She just signed. Black ink on glossy paper, initials on the corners, signature on the last page. Griffin Lane smiled as she slid the folder back toward him, his manicured fingers tapping twice like she'd just agreed to a vacation, not a transaction. You won't regret this, he said with a grin far too large for the size of the diner booth they were crammed into. This is just the beginning. Lennox nodded once. She didn't trust him. She didn't even like him. But her grandfather's surgery was scheduled for that afternoon, and Griffin had promised guaranteed that everything would be handled full cost covered, post-op meds delivered, private recovery suite, even follow-up care, all in writing, all tied to her name, now owned by the company stamped at the top of that glossy contract. By noon, they were at the hospital. Griffin's crew had already arrived, 3 deep, one with a camera, one with a clipboard, and one holding a ring light. Lennox tried to push them away at first, but Griffin whispered, "Just smile for the intro. After that, you can do whatever you want. Think of it as repaying the investment." Her grandfather didn't ask questions. He never did. Lennox had only told him that someone kind stepped in, someone who believed in her music. He hadn't pushed further. He just gripped her hand in the pre-op room and said, "Whatever you did to make this happen, I'm proud of you." And those words clung to her ribs, like ice. The surgery began at 3:12. By 3:40, Lennox was in the hospital's courtyard, sitting in a metal chair in full makeup, staring into a lens as a woman named Bree asked her to talk about the moment you knew music was your healing. She smiled, through gritted teeth, through the ache of guilt swelling in her chest. "Probably when I realized I didn't need to scream to be heard." "Perfect," Bree said, eyes bright. "So raw. Can we do one more take?" They filmed 5. She faked it through 4. By 6:10 p.m., her grandfather was in recovery. Stable. Breathing easy. Lennox left the hospital after hugging him. Camera still rolling as Griffin clapped her on the back like they were teammates. "This," he said, "is how we change the narrative. You're not just surviving, Lennox. You're inspiring." But something in her gut twisted harder with every word. That night, back at her apartment, she couldn't sleep. She played her old voice memos on loop, scratch recordings of original songs, unfinished verses, cracked harmonies captured on bad headphones. It was her real self in those clips, untidy, unfiltered, and now, she wasn't sure if she'd ever hear that version again. At 2:11 a.m., her phone lit up with a message. "Unknown number. Check the news. Your name's trending." She blinked, bleary-eyed, opened her browser. The headline read, "Major hospital faces scrutiny over ties to PR laundering scheme." And below it, a photo. Her. Walking out of the hospital, smiling. The article broke it down in cold, perfect detail. A scandal had been brewing around one of the hospital's largest donors, a man named Douglas Vance, who was under federal investigation for bribery and financial misconduct. In an effort to salvage public trust, the hospital had partnered with a media firm to redirect attention away from the case. That firm was Griffin Lane Entertainment. The redemption campaign they'd launched, her story. The surgery deposit, not from Shaq, not from a foundation, not from a good deed. It was hush money, filtered through the media deal, a calculated move to buy back headlines with sympathy. Lennox's blood ran cold. She stared at the screen as if it might apologize. A knock on the door snapped her out of it. She didn't move at first. Another knock, louder this time. She opened it slowly, chain still fastened. Shaq stood there, hoodie up, face solemn. "How long have you known?" she asked through the gap. "Since this morning." "And you didn't tell me?" "I wanted to, but I didn't know if you'd hear me." She unlatched the door and stepped aside. He walked in, slow and heavy, like he carried the weight of the whole mistake on his back. "I didn't want you to feel small," he said. "You were finally standing tall. I didn't want to knock that down." "I needed to know," she said, voice cracking.
"I know."
They sat in silence, the article still open on her phone, the truth still burning between them. She turned to him. "I gave them everything. My name, my story, my pain, and they turned it into a damn smoke bomb for some crooked billionaire." Shaq didn't say "I told you so." He didn't need to. "I thought I was taking control," she whispered. "I thought I was making a move. You were. They just twisted it." Her eyes watered but no tears fell. "I thought I was finally saving him. My grandfather." "You did." "No. I just sold myself to do it." Shaq leaned forward. "You didn't sell your soul, Lennox. They stole it. There's a difference." She looked away. "I don't know how to come back from this." "You don't have to come back. Just go forward. But this time, on your terms." She scoffed. "I signed the deal, Shaq. Then break it. They'll sue. Then let them. We'll fight. I got lawyers. Real ones." She didn't speak for a long time. The night outside her window felt colder now. Heavier. Finally, she whispered, "I want my voice back." Shaq nodded. "Then we take it back." They sat in that apartment until the sun began to sneak through the blinds, casting pale light on broken promises, unread contracts, and two people who had both made mistakes. But this time, they weren't running from them. They were ready to fight. The next time Lennox saw Shaq, he wasn't in a hoodie. He walked into the diner just after sunrise wearing a black suit, tailored clean, crisp at the shoulders. The place wasn't open yet. Ruth was still counting bills at the register, and the lights over the jukebox hadn't warmed up. Shaq didn't speak to anyone. He slid into the booth where he always sat, pulled out a folder with red tabs and gold-lettered watermark, and waited. Lennox walked in 10 minutes later, keys still in hand, hair pulled back like she'd stopped pretending to sleep hours ago. When she saw him, her steps slowed, not out of surprise but recognition. She already knew. "You found something," she said, slipping into the booth across from him. Shaq slid the folder toward her. "I found everything." Inside, documents, names, email threads, digital footprints that traced Griffin Lane's firm to over a dozen similar influencer redemption campaigns, all built on manipulating trauma, each one designed not just to distract from scandal, but to profit from it. They'd used people's pain like packaging. And her story? It had just been the latest product on their shelf. Lennox flipped through the papers, her eyes narrowing with every turn.
"You hired lawyers," she said.
"I did." She looked up. "You're going to war?" Shaq nodded. "We are." The silence stretched between them. Heavy, but not empty. Lennox leaned back, crossed her arms. "I don't know if I have it in me." "You don't have to swing a sword," Shaq replied. "Just stand." "Stand against who? A whole system? A corporation with more lawyers than I've met people?" "Yes." Her voice dipped. "I've never won anything." Shaq's eyes met hers, steady and unshaken. "You're not here to win. You're here to be heard." The words settled in her chest like anchors, pulling her down, then holding her still. Over the next 2 weeks, they met every morning. Shaq had cleared his calendar. No press, no shoots, no courtside appearances. He wasn't doing this for PR. He didn't tweet about it. No cameras followed him in or out of meetings. It wasn't a campaign. It was personal. Lennox sat beside his legal team in oversized hoodies and scuffed-up Converse, a notebook in her lap filled with scribbled thoughts and unsent lyrics. At first, she barely spoke, just listened. But as the days went on, her voice returned. She asked questions, made connections. She remembered everything. Names, dates, inflections in Griffin's tone. Emails she hadn't deleted because something in her gut had always said to hold on. Together, they built a case. Not just against Griffin Lane, but against the system that allowed companies like his to thrive. The hospital's board, the donation channels, the backdoor media deals. They started mapping the machine, piece by corrupt piece. Shaq, for all his size, played it quiet. He didn't storm rooms. He filled them with presence, with patience, with pressure that didn't need volume to land. He let Lennox lead, even when she stumbled. Especially when she stumbled. One morning, in the middle of a strategy session, Lennox closed her notebook and said, "What if they flip it? What if they say I'm just trying to stay relevant? That I'm bitter because the deal went bad?" Shaq didn't blink. "Then they'll do what they always do. And you'll still be louder." "I don't want pity." "You won't get pity. You'll get power. And if we lose..." Shaq gave a small shrug. "We don't lose. We learn loud enough that the next girl they try to exploit knows what not to sign." Lennox stared at him, emotions twisted somewhere between admiration and fear. "You always talk like you've already been through it." "I have," he said simply. Different stage. Same theft. There were moments when she wanted to quit. Days when the weight of it all, the legal briefs, the media pressure, the knowledge that her pain was now evidence felt like too much. But every time she opened the napkin Lucille had given her, now taped to the inside cover of her notebook. Sometimes we sing not to be heard, but to survive. It reminded her what this was really about. Not fame, not contracts. Survival, ownership, dignity. Late one night, while reviewing case notes in her apartment, she started writing again. Not legal testimony. Music, lyrics that had nothing to do with heartbreak or record deals. Lyrics about quiet resistance, about being underestimated, about holding yourself together when the world is trying to take you apart. She filled 3 pages in one sitting. The next morning she handed them to Shaq across their booth. You think this could work? She asked. He read silently, then folded the pages carefully, and said, It already does. That same day, Shaq arranged for her to meet with a sound engineer he trusted. Not a label exec, not a manager, just a woman with a home studio and enough experience to keep it real. You want to record it? The woman asked. Lennox nodded. One take. No edits. Just how it sounds in my head. 2 days later, the song existed untouched, raw, and registered under her name. Her name. No contracts. No middlemen. They didn't release it yet. They waited. Until the press caught wind of the lawsuit. Until Griffin's firm denied everything. Until Lennox's video started resurfacing in timelines and hashtags again. This time with commentary not about her voice but about her courage. Then they released the song. Quietly. Just a link. No marketing. No campaign. The title not for sale. It didn't explode overnight. It didn't need to. Because every person who heard it, really heard it, felt something they couldn't ignore. Griffin tried to counter, issued statements, released canned videos of other success stories, but none of them landed the same way. They all felt staged, empty. Meanwhile, Lennox's case moved forward. Slowly. But not silently. And through it all, Shaq remained close. Not to protect her, not to speak for her, just to walk beside her, steady as always. One morning before their final mediation session, Lennox looked at him and said, I don't know what happens after this. Shaq smiled, small and tired but real. You live, you write, you sing, but now you get to choose how. And she believed him, because finally, the story was hers, just her and the mic. The crowd leaned in, expecting softness. She gave them fire. The first notes were quiet, but not delicate, intentional. Her voice didn't tremble. It pierced, not with volume, but with precision. Every syllable held its weight, and every pause dared the audience to breathe. She sang about being poor in a world obsessed with appearances, about being heard only when crying, about being sold as a sob story, then discarded when the healing didn't fit a clean arc. The lyrics didn't rhyme perfectly. They weren't sugar-coated. They were scalpel sharp, honest, defiant. She sang about the hospital, about the contract, about the lies dressed as opportunity, about the people who say they care, until the truth cost them their comfort. She didn't name names. She didn't have to. The room began to shift. The polite smiles tightened. Champagne flutes were lowered. Some jaws clenched. A few people stood to leave. Not all at once, in ones and twos. Small, quiet exits. She kept singing. And as the final verse hit, about reclaiming her name, her voice, her story, she stepped forward, closer to the edge of the stage, closer to the ones who still stayed. Half the room remained, frozen, silent, moved. She finished the song. Let the last note ring out like an echo from somewhere deeper than pain. Then she dropped the mic, not with flair but with finality, and walked off the stage without bowing. No encore. No wave. She walked out through the side door and into the night air before anyone could catch her. The video hit social media within an hour. Not from the press. Not from the event team. From someone in the back row who had quietly filmed her entire set, captioned it. She came to sing for them. She ended up singing about them. The clip exploded. Again. But this time it wasn't about pity. It was power. Comment sections filled with fire emojis. Quotes pulled from her lyrics. Hashtags like, not for sale, trending within hours. People weren't crying. They were listening. Angry, awakened, inspired. Griffin Lane tried damage control. Issued a statement about being blindsided. Called the performance unplanned. Said her tone didn't align with the gala's intentions. Lennox didn't respond. She didn't need to. Because this time the voice being shared wasn't theirs. It was hers. And she didn't need anyone's permission to keep using it. The glow of the spotlight had long faded. What was once buzzing in boxes, trending hashtags, and voice notes from labels with hollow promises had gone quiet. Peacefully quiet. Not the kind that comes from retreat, but the kind you earn when you decide to stop running. Lennox had vanished from the noise not in defeat, but by design. And somewhere between the chaos and calm, she'd stitched herself back together. Now the diner opened at 6 a.m. sharp, just like always. Same cracked linoleum. Same stubborn jukebox. Same air that smelled like fried eggs and old vinyl. But for Lennox it had become something else. something steady, something hurt. She worked the mornings, sleeves rolled, apron tied tight, hair knotted back without care for symmetry. No camera crews, no lingering reporters, just black coffee, stacked plates, and the occasional hum under her breath when she forgot to guard her melody. Most of the regulars didn't recognize her, and if they did, they didn't mention it. They left her alone, which was its own kind of respect. There was healing in the mundane, in the small rituals of wiping counters and pouring coffee with rhythm. It let her reclaim her voice on her terms, not as a product, but as a person. Her grandfather was recovering. Slowly, but better every day. He'd started taking walks again, started humming old gospel songs under his breath like he used to. Some days he'd sit by the window of their apartment with a blanket across his knees and ask her to sing, just once. She would, softly, never the same song twice. She didn't write them down anymore. She just let them happen. Shaq came by sometimes, always early, always alone. He never made an entrance, never asked questions. He'd just sit at his old booth, hoodie half sipped, and nod when she brought him his usual turkey sausage, grits, and a black coffee that tasted more like memory than caffeine. They didn't talk much. At first, Lennox thought it was awkward silence, the kind that lingered after too many unspoken things. But eventually she realized it was different. It wasn't silence between strangers. It was the quiet between two people who had already said what mattered. The words they didn't say now only made space for the peace they'd earned. One morning, weeks after the gala, after the lawsuit had quietly resolved, after the media had moved on to its next packaged redemption arc, Lennox approached Shaq's table with a to-go cup in one hand and a slim jewel case in the other. She set them down gently, the cup first, then the case. Shaq raised an eyebrow, fingers resting on the edge of the plastic like he already knew what it was. She sat down across from him without asking. "It's done," she said. He picked it up slowly, turned it in his hands. No flashy art, just a black cover with white text, scrawled in her handwriting, simple, raw, her name, and below it, 2 words, "Not for sale." He gave a soft laugh, nodding once. "That's the first thing I ever heard you say." Lennox smiled, not wide, not performative, just enough. "I recorded it at the same studio you introduced me to. Didn't take any deals. No label, just me, a beat-up mic, and some friends who believe in bartering instead of contracts." He opened the case. Inside, a single disc, no label, just black Sharpie. "You made this?" he asked. "Pressed it myself," she said. "Burned 50 copies. Might do more if I feel like it." "What's it sound like?" She looked out the window, watching the city wake up in slow motion, like someone learning to breathe again. He didn't ask what tracks were on it. Didn't ask if she'd mentioned him. Didn't need to. Instead, he took a long sip of the diner's coffee, burnt, slightly bitter, exactly as bad as always, and sighed like it tasted better than anything he could buy in Beverly Hills. "You good?" he asked, finally. She nodded. "Not perfect, but good." "You ready to be seen again?" "I think I finally know how to be seen without being owned." Shaq set the case down on the table, folded his massive hands around the coffee, and gave her a long look, steady, proud, knowing. "They're gonna come back for you, you know. I'm counting on it," she said, grinning now. "But this time they'll be buying tickets, not my truth." The door opened behind them. A gust of spring wind slipping through. Another early riser stepped in, nodding at Ruth. The jukebox flickered to life with a soulful hum. Something old, something honest. Lennox stood. "I should get back." Shaq lifted the CD once more, giving it a little tap. "You want the world to hear this? I want the right people to hear it. That's enough." He looked at her one last time. "You know, some voices were never meant for stages. They're meant for spaces like this, where the truth can echo." She didn't reply, just slid the coffee pot under her arm and walked back to the counter, apron swinging slightly, humming something new that wasn't written yet. And Shaq? He stayed a little longer than usual, long enough to finish his plate, long enough to play the first track in his car, long enough to know that whatever battles came next, Lennox wasn't just ready, she was unshakable. The sun had just started to slip behind the rooftops, smearing the sky with streaks of orange and lavender. The city was still moving, always moving, but in this little pocket of Edgewater, everything felt slower, more grounded. The diner stood where it always had, windows smudged with fingerprints in time, its neon sign buzzing gently like it had a pulse of its own. No cameras, no crews, no flashbulbs, just the ordinary magic of a Wednesday evening settling in. And then her voice. It wasn't announced. No stage. No amplification. Just Lennox standing on the curb outside the diner, one foot propped on the edge of the sidewalk. Her hands tucked into the pockets of a jean jacket too worn to pretend it was new. Her curls were loose and wild, catching what little breeze remained. The tune slipped from her lips like it had been waiting all day to be let out. The kids were the first to notice. 3 of them, barefoot and sticky from ice pops, stopped mid-chalk drawing and turned toward her, eyes wide. One of them dropped a piece of blue chalk and didn't bother picking it up. They gathered closer, forming a crooked semicircle, hands still dusted with candy residue and sidewalk dust. She sang like she had nothing to prove. No pitch-perfect performance. No calculated runs. Just a melody carried on the weight of memory, love, and breath. It was a song that didn't chase approval. It offered connection, something intimate and unguarded, the kind of singing people used to do before phones started recording, before every sound needed a platform. And just a few yards away, across the street beneath a rusted stop sign, Big Shaq sat on a crooked park bench, half shaded by a lopsided magnolia tree. He was alone, hoodie zipped halfway, elbows resting on his knees, watching, but not interrupting, not filming, not reacting for effect, just being there. There was a quiet pride in his eyes, something deep and old, a kind of stillness that comes when you've seen someone claw their way out of silence and choose music again, not as a weapon, not as a way out, but as a way to stay. He didn't need to talk to her. He didn't need to say he was proud. The truth was already hanging in the air between them, threaded through the notes drifting across the street. It had been weeks since the gala, since the lawsuit, since Lennox took her name back and released Not for Sale on her own terms. There had been buzz, of course, interviews requested, offers hinted, but she didn't chase them. She didn't run from them either. She just paused. The album found its way into hands that mattered. Not millions, just enough. People who understood the story behind the voice, who felt the sting in her lyrics, the defiance in her restraint. No glitz, no rollout, word of mouth in its purest form. And now here she was, singing in the place that had raised her voice, surrounded by neighborhood kids and cracked pavement, the rhythm of passing cars blending with the soft hum of her song. From across the way, Ruth cracked open the diner's front door, arms crossed as she leaned on the frame, nodding in rhythm. A few patrons peeked out from booths, spoons paused over pie. No one tried to pull out a phone. Not here. They knew better. This was sacred. This was hers. Lennox finished the song the way it began. Gently. No vocal fireworks. Just a quiet closing note. Like the sigh after a long day. The kids clapped awkwardly, unsure if they were allowed to cheer. She smiled at them and gave a little mock bow. Sing another, one of the younger boys shouted. She laughed, only if you help with the chorus next time. The sidewalk became a playground again, but the energy had shifted, like the world had taken a breath and remembered what it felt like to listen without expectation. She turned slowly and glanced across the street. Shaq didn't wave. She didn't either. They didn't need to. Their story didn't need a ribbon tied at the end. It wasn't about grand gestures or big conclusions. It was about showing up, again and again, until the person you believed in no longer needed saving. Just space. He thought back to the first time he saw her. That diner performance that set the internet on fire. How raw she'd looked. How scared, but determined. Even then, even before she knew anyone was watching. Even before she knew her voice would become a battleground for money, control, and ownership. And now, she stood taller, moved freer. She hadn't just reclaimed her name, she'd reclaimed her why. Back at the bench, Shaq stood slowly, stretched, his knees cracked, a reminder of how long he'd been in the game, on and off the court. He didn't cross the street, didn't go to her. He just picked up the envelope sitting beside him, one of the 50 self-burned CDs she'd handed out earlier that week. Not for sale. He slid it into his hoodie pocket like a keepsake, nodded once toward her, and started down the sidewalk. No rush, no big exit. Lennox watched him go. She didn't call out, didn't chase, just turned back toward the kids now asking her about the lyrics. Tugging at her sleeves, giggling about how grown-up songs always sound sad but feel nice. She knelt beside them, chalk now in her hand, drawing lazy lines and music notes across the pavement. As she hummed the beginning of something new. No camera would capture this. No trending clip, no headline, just truth. And that finally was enough. Because she wasn't singing to be found. She wasn't singing to be saved. She was singing because she could. If this story struck a chord, don't scroll past it. Sit with it. Share it with someone who still believes art can heal, and that voices like Lennox's shouldn't have to scream to be heard. Keep your eyes open for the unheard, the unseen, the almost forgotten, and when the world tries to sell someone's story, choose to listen instead.